CJSW 90.9 FM broadcasts out of Mohkinstsis at the University of Calgary campus radio station. Located on Treaty 7 land, we would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region and southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta. We would also like to note that the University of Calgary is situated on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River. Hello everyone, my name is Sabina Ocharo and I'm your host for this podcast episode of Beyond the Textbook. Today we'll be diving into how Indigenous perspectives are shaping sustainability efforts here at the University of Calgary. And this podcast will examine the integration of these perspectives into campus initiatives, particularly within the Institutional Sustainability Strategy Action Plan. By creating pathways that honor both Indigenous and Western approaches, this podcast aims to enhance education and foster meaningful, lasting change in sustainability practices. So today, I'm joined by two insightful guests, one of them being from the Office of Sustainability and the other being a leader for advocacy in support of Indigenous students and fostering community at this university. Together, they'll share their experiences and ideas about Indigenous sustainability on campus and how these efforts are shaping the way we approach sustainability. Our first guest has played an important role in shaping the Institutional Sustainability Action Plan, which integrates Indigenous perspectives into campus sustainability efforts. Before we dive in, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Travis Milnes. I'm with the Office of Sustainability, and typically my role is the specialist for Campus's Learning Lab. But for this specific project, one of the things that I've been doing is supporting in organizing the launch for the December 3rd event, which is kind of launching the action plan to the campus community.
All right. Could you walk us through the Institutional Sustainability Strategy Action Plan? We'd love to hear about what it involves, how it came together, and the goals it's working toward.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been about, in 2016, our initial institutional sustainability strategy was developed. And while it provided a really good starting place for sustainable action on campus, one of the things that we realized and others realized across campus over the years is that we could do a lot more when it comes to Indigenous collaborations and reconciliation towards sustainability and embedding those knowledges within our sustainable actions. And so one of the things that we wanted to do with this action plan was take a parallel paths approach, which is something that's been growing across campus. And so it's actually been about 2 years in the making, where we were developing relationships with Indigenous elders across campus and in local communities to really understand what sustainability means to local Indigenous peoples of Treaty 7. And also, over the last year after that, engaging the campus community more from an institutional standpoint. So, for example, distributing surveys and things like that. And so these parallel paths have come together through focus groups or dialogue circles with Indigenous faculty, students, and staff, as well as Indigenous elders. And then on the institutional side, through surveys and focus groups with students, faculty, and staff, kind of from the Western perspective, to kind of combine into this action plan to tackle sustainability for the coming years.
I see. That is a pretty comprehensive overview. There seems to be a lot of intention behind the plan, but building on that, I'm quite curious. When it comes to the Sustainability Action Plan, how do Western perspectives differ from Indigenous perspectives, and how are these differences addressed in the plan?
So one of the things I think you'll notice, it's actually being released on November 28th, and I think one of the things you'll notice is that when it comes to these Western perspectives, or these institutional perspectives, as we've kind of titled them, is that they are much more focused on things like emissions reductions, right? Or kind of stats and figures around how do we kind of manage our built landscape, specifically with our buildings, and reduce our emissions towards to encourage more action towards climate change. And so the difference is, I would say, that the Indigenous perspective takes a look at more of our relationship to one another, as well as to our local landscapes and the species that we're interacting with every day, and is much more focused on this relationship building for how we encourage more collective approach, more collective understanding of the Indigenous perspective towards sustainability, as well as developing things on campus like an Indigenous naturalized garden within our sustainable garden on campus. And so that's an exciting goal that I'm looking forward to over the coming years.
The garden does sound exciting, and I think it's interesting to hear you reinforce these perspectives, being that it resonates with the research I've done regarding the protocols, which I feel helped me understand these differences. And speaking of Indigenous protocols, how does the Sustainability Office incorporate Indigenous ethical protocols?
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond the relationship building that we've taken into account over the last 2 years, and the first year was kind of purely focused on developing those relationships. Most recently, we are having a pipe ceremony on November 28th to ensure that the Indigenous elders that we've been working with, and the community of faculty, staff, and students who are Indigenous that we've been consulting with, they approve and kind of recognize the action plan that has been put together, and kind of recognizes this as an opportunity, as a starting place for the next couple of years when it comes to sustainability. And so that's coming first, and then kind of on the institutional side, we'll see a December 3rd launch to the whole community. And so you can kind of see, even when in our events, we're trying to work with Indigenous protocols in these launches.
Right, and I think that's such a critical foundation being laid, with relationships being built and the action plan being grounded in community. It seems clear to me that a deeper cultural shift is being fostered. And speaking of that, how is this project shifting the culture within the Office of Sustainability, and what does it mean for the future of Indigenous sustainability?
I think that I from a personal perspective, I think it is a really great learning opportunity about what sustainability means. In my education, like kind of going back to those stats and figures and emissions reduction, it's very data focused when it comes to sustainability. But I think that we can do a better job at recognizing different ways of understanding what sustainability means, and going back to kind of a TAPTOE, which is the Indigenous engagement strategy for the university, connecting to ways of being, ways of doing, ways of understanding. And there's one more I'm missing in the conceptual model, is really important when it comes to understanding on how we are communicating sustainability, how we're engaging with different peoples across campus and with the landscape that we reside on, and how we can work towards. There's kind of this concept of sustainability for 7 generations, and I think that we can do a better job of that when it comes to sustainability on campus.
Right. And building on everything we've talked about so far, Travis, how do you think the idea of sustainability and Indigenous engagement can be applied to the Indigenous students that are on our campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that we could do better is ensure that there are meaningful opportunities of engagement with sustainability, and that everyone feels included in the work that we do. And if people don't feel included, then we need to kind of get to the bottom of that, because I think sustainability impacts everyone, and the only way that we're going to create a sustainable future is if everyone's on board.
All right, that was such an educational and insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Travis, for sharing your expertise and perspectives. It's been amazing to hear how sustainability and Indigenous engagement are being brought to life on campus.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Our next guest is an advocate and leader for Indigenous students and community building at the University of Calgary. They're passionate about creating opportunities for connection and staying deeply rooted in their cultural heritage. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself, your background, your position at the Indigenous Students Circle, and what inspires the work that you do?
Bujun Indigenous Cadena Brazeau, Kisi Quinin Nindunjaba. Hello, my name is Cadena Brazeau. I'm from Kisi Quinin First Nation, Treaty 2 territory, back in Manitoba. I'm currently the president of the Indigenous Students Circle, and I was working at the Writing Symbols Lodge, and I am doing my undergrad in Law and Society right now.
Thank you, Kadina. As the president of your club, I've seen that you've been deeply involved in building community on campus through initiatives like the Indigenous Students Circle. This has led a positive impact on creating belonging for Indigenous students. Are there any specific programs or opportunities at this university that stood out to you as especially meaningful for Indigenous students?
Yeah, the Indigenous Student Circle has been really meaningful and impactful on my journey in university, especially in the second semester of my first year. In my first year of university, I didn't immediately find my way to for these spaces designed for Indigenous students. It wasn't until my second semester that I started visiting the Writing Symbols Lodge, and even then, it took a lot for me to involve myself. It was really intimidating not knowing anyone in the space itself didn't feel overly inviting at first. I think that's a common challenge for many Indigenous students. Not always feeling like fully welcomed in these spaces, and there not always being a strong sense of community being fostered. During that same semester, I joined the Indigenous Student Circle as an executive director of communications. Being part of the ISC helped me build relationships with other students and really connect me to larger Indigenous community on campus. Now, as a president of the Indigenous Student Circle, one of my main goals is to help create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for Indigenous students.
Right. And at the same time, we know that some areas like clubs or campus initiatives might feel underdeveloped in terms of Indigenous engagement. So, what do you think contributes to those gaps, and how do you think the university can address them?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the barriers is the physical space we currently have for Indigenous engagement. The Writing Symbols Lodge has been outdated and too small for the growing number of Indigenous students at the University of Calgary. It's really hard to foster community in a space that feels a little bit disconnected, especially when the rest of campus has been seeing modern renovations. It sometimes feels like Indigenous students are an afterthought, and that can be a lot of discouragement that they face. That being said, I want to acknowledge our workers at the Writing Symbols Lodge, our manager Karen and Larry. Larry's a worker and an elder at the lodge, and they do a really good job engaging students and just making sure that they're feeling comfortable at the lodge, despite the limitations of the space. They work really hard to create a welcoming as possible and go out of their way to connect with students that are visiting the lodge.
Those are pretty great points, and it seems that these are pretty important steps towards creating something more cohesive. And I also think it's worth considering whether mentorship or collaboration could be seen as part of the solution. What do you think might be viewed as the best way forward in this regard?
Yeah, for sure. I think bringing in Indigenous mentors for people specialized in their programming and stuff like that can be a really big inspiration for students, especially students through the ISAP program that are still figuring out what they want to do. I think that would really benefit them.
Yeah, totally. And it makes me wonder if mentorship or partnerships with Indigenous knowledge keepers, or even having Indigenous representation and leadership roles within clubs could help bridge those gaps. What do you think would be the most effective starting point for fostering these kinds of connections?
I think the first aspect of that would definitely be connecting with community and listening to what the students need and want, and then finding them those connections and allowing them to network through those mentorships.
Right. Thank you. And as it's important to bring Indigenous ethics and knowledge into these spaces, um, from your perspective, what do you think the university as a whole could be doing more to include these perspectives when it comes to these sustainability efforts?
Yeah, I think that as sustainable people since time immemorial, Indigenous ethics and knowledge are essential to many meaningful sustainable projects. Our ways of knowing are rooted in deep connection to the land, and they emphasize balance and respect for all living beings. Engaging with elders and youth is especially important in this work. Elders bring invaluable traditional knowledge and teachings, while youth bring fresh perspectives and energy to carrying out these teachings. In the context of Treaty 7 territory, I think it's really vital to connect with local community members. This is a key factor. Building relationships with the Indigenous peoples on whose lands we are ensures that sustainability efforts are grounded in respect for local knowledge systems and practices. For me, fostering these connections is not just about environmental sustainability, but also cultural sustainability, ensuring that our knowledge and ways of life continue to thrive for future generations.
Yeah, totally. And the eco movement program is such a great example of promoting reuse and resourcefulness. It seems like there's a natural connection to Indigenous teachings about circular economies and sustainability. How do you think those teachings could enhance this initiative and make it more impactful?
Yeah, the Eco Move Up program outlined in the Institutional Sustainability Report aligns really well with Indigenous teachings, particularly the concept of circular economies. By recycling and reusing items, the program facilitates a full circle transition from outgoing students and residents to incoming students while reducing consumption and waste. This practice resonates with the tradition of giveaways among with many other Indigenous communities where items or gifts are shared with others, promoting generosity and reducing waste. I think they're maybe even implementing that for Indigenous students, I think is a really good idea. And just maybe like more cultural knowledge on that to maybe reiterate the importance of giving away things and to keep that full circle going.
Yeah, looking ahead, the university has the chance to leave a lasting legacy that reflects both environmental stewardship and reconciliation. But what steps do you think the university could take to ensure that the legacy reflects the meaningful action and has commitment to it?
A long-term sustainability project at the University of Calgary has a potential to leave a legacy that embodies both environmental stewardship and meaningful reconciliation. To achieve this, Indigenous students should have access to the necessary resources and a supportive community, enabling their meaningful involvement in these projects. This approach would ensure that sustainability initiatives reflect diverse perspectives and values. I think that involving Indigenous students is a really important step in this process, sorry.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned, the importance of respecting sacred Indigenous knowledge, and ensuring that it isn't misused or misappropriated. What do you think settlers can do to respect Indigenous people's rights to keep certain ways of knowing sacred and while still incorporating ethical protocols into these sustainability practices?
In my view, I think settlers can really enhance sustainability initiatives in a way that genuinely respects Indigenous ethics and protocols and ways of knowing by approaching these efforts with integrity and humility. It's really important that their actions do not serve their own agendas, but instead honor and incorporate Indigenous values by truly valuing and respecting these teachings. They can contribute to initiatives that are both respectful and impactful by doing so because it should be a priority to have our ways of knowing and ways of being involved in this process.
Kadina, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been incredible to hear your perspective on building community, fostering sustainability, and bridging gaps through meaningful action. Your passion for creating opportunities and staying rooted in your heritage is truly inspiring.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Get you miigwech.
Today's episode explored how Indigenous perspectives are shaping sustainability at the University of Calgary, as Travis provided valuable insights into the Institutional Sustainability Action Plan. He emphasized the importance of allyship, ethical protocols, and integrating Indigenous and Western approaches. Cadena highlighted the critical role of community building through the Indigenous Students Circle, as she shared her vision for bridging gaps and explored how mentorship and Indigenous teachings can further enhance sustainability efforts. As we wrap up, I hope our listeners feel encouraged to reflect on their own roles, whether it's within sustainability efforts, reconciliation, or supporting and amplifying Indigenous voices. These conversations remind us that real change happens when we commit to learning, collaboration, and taking intentional action. Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Textbook.